I joined the academy in Dehradun directly after, while doing my college in January 1956. And I was commissioned from the Indian Military Academy in December 1957 into the Maratha Light Infantry, the 20th Battalion of the Maratha Light Infantry. But getting on to the Bangladesh War itself. Now, when the Bangladesh War was imminent, I was in fact doing my senior command course at the College of Combat in Mao, the now called the Army War College. And that course was terminated prematurely, and we were reverted to our battalions because the imminence of war was quite evident by about September, October 1971. It was clear that the country would be going to war. So I rejoined my battalion. That is, I was by then with the 1st Battalion, the Maratha Light Infantry. I left them in Nagaland, and the battalion was moved to the border with Bangladesh in October 1971. And I rejoined them on the 8th of November, I still recall the date, 8th of November 1971. Now, at that time, the battalion was engaged in operating together with our Mukti Bahini colleagues across the border, and we were literally, wearing lungis and operating with our friends from the Mukti Bahini. It was quite a unique experience in that sense, and I make this point because I think those operations which were conducted before the actual outbreak of war were very significant in context of the fact that it firstly brought the Mukti Bahini and us very close together. We got to understand each other, and in many ways we bonded literally. And of particular significance, so far as I personally was concerned, was a major ambush that we laid, a 2-company ambush. I was the senior company commander. In fact, I was a rifle company commander at that time, at the outbreak of war. That is a major in command of a body of troops. My commanding officer then was Lieutenant Colonel Kuldeep Singh Brar, who later achieved fame during the Blue Star operation and retired as Army Commander, Eastern Command. So he was the battalion commander. I'll revert to some of that aspect here. So there was this 2-company ambush which was well planned and orchestrated on the night of 13th, 14th of November 1971. Its significance basically lay in the fact that we carried out a reconnaissance 3-4 days earlier. We were guided to the planning was a feint, an attack orchestrated against the border post, and to counter which the heavy mortar battery of the Pakistanis used to move up and take on our troops. This had happened before. So this particular night, it was so orchestrated that a simulated attack against the border post would take place, and this 2-company ambush, which was cited by me, in between the border post and the company headquarters, in order to ambush this heavy mortar battery as it moved up. And this is quite unique and thing in the sense because we had this 2-company ambush with the battalion headquarters and another company in reserve. And the early hours of the morning, this heavy mortar battery moved up to give support to what they thought was an attack on the border post. And when there was a heavy fog at that time. So we had deployed our troops, my company closer to the company headquarters, another company of mine commanded by my colleague, one Major Puntambekar, towards the border outpost side. And we had dug in slit trenches in sugarcane fields just about 70 odd yards from the main road. The idea was to, as these people come in to the ambush site, we would knock them off. Now it so happened, it's I suppose a coincidence that the selection of the ambush site was such, and my instructions to the team, since I was the senior company commander, was that the platoon of my colleague's company nearer towards the outpost would fire first when the first vehicle of this battery reaches them. So I was watching this from my position with my company. The first vehicle, sort of silhouetted in the fog, with the Pakistanis sort of sitting up on that on the roof of the vehicle. The first vehicle went past. The second one, the third one, towing the heavy mortars, and when the fourth one went past, I still did not find any response from the person who was supposed to be opening fire at them. So I whispered into the radio set to check why this was not happening. So the response I got was that he cannot see any vehicle yet. Now, as it happened, these chaps decided to deploy in the spot where they had laid the ambush, which was why the vehicle didn't go beyond that. So that was happening, and one could hear certain, the jangling of metal and whatnot. So as the fifth vehicle came in, I told my recoilless rifle, 57mm recoilless rifle man, because that was the ammunition vehicle. I was obviously ready for it. I said, you fire at that. So this man, with trembling hands at that time, we're literally sitting 70 meters. He fired his 57mm gun, a recoilless gun, and hit it bang on and blew up that ammunition vehicle. Then, of course, all hell broke loose, and we all opened, the whole jing bang lot of us opened fire at them. And as I mentioned to you, they were deploying in the middle of our ambush site, and we naturally sort of decimated that heavy mortar battery. But as things were happening, because there was a gap between my company and my colleague's company, the commanding officer decided to send a third company to sort of, clean up, literally, as you say, mop up the sort of thing. So while that company was moving up, I moved away from my company to indicate to them where they should deploy. And as I was doing that, remember, all this was in lungis, and we were in lungis and whatnot. The company commander got onto my radio set and told me that there was a machine gun team firing in that area of the gap that he was supposed to come and occupy. And that machine gun team at that point of time was literally about 50 yards from where I happened to be waiting. And so he warned me about it. I went to ground, got hold of a grenade from one of my colleagues, threw it at this team, jumped up and shot both those machine gunners with my Sten gun. I could see the bullets, getting into their bodies. Then, of course, that as far as I was concerned, that action was over. So then I made sure that the company deployed, and we sort of rounded up, and there was nothing to round up, because they were either dead Pakistanis or the rest had run away. And then, of course, we had to quickly recoup, get back to base at the border, because at first light we would have been the target of the Pakistani aircraft. Since the movement was through marsh, literally, we would have been sitting targets at that time. So that was one of the major events I'm quoting, because I was physically involved in this. But most importantly, I think that incident, together with some others, we had carried out some other raids and all that, gave the Mukti Bahinis also tremendous confidence in our professionalism and ability. So therefore they became so much closer to us, and we could ask them to do anything for us, and they would be willingly ready to do it. So that was just before the war. On the declaration of war, of course, the battalion advanced after last light on the 3rd of December, and we were tasked, basically our battalion was tasked by the higher commander to move across country with our big packs carrying our personal equipment, clothing and rations, and our Mukti friends would help us with the heavy weapons and ammunition. So we first had to tackle this company company headquarters post at Bakshiganj, which was about 10 to 15 kilometers from the border. So we advanced across country, came and sort of, surrounded that post. And as it happened, during the night, we did our reconnaissance, in order to attack the post the next morning. But on the morning of the night of the 4th, 5th, the Pakistanis decided to vacate that post because they knew that now the die was cast and the battle was on. Their instructions to the border post to withdraw fell through because that border post was also by then isolated. But these people, the company headquarters and its personnel, managed to pull out of Bakshiganj. So we secured Bakshiganj without any fight, as it were. Now after that, again, we were asked to move towards the battalion garrison at a place called Jamalpur on the axis towards Tangail and Dhaka. Now that obviously was a major operation. While the others were tasked to move along the road axis, we were again tasked, that is the first Marathas, the Jangi Paltan as it was called, were tasked to go across country, get across the tributary of the Brahmaputra and get behind Jamalpur. And as the senior company commander, I was given the privilege of leading that advance. We managed to cross this tributary of the Brahmaputra in country boats, helped by the locals and our Mukti friends, who managed to get them all together. It's quite a unique operation. I mean, we didn't have no boats, nothing, no bridges. The locals provided us with these boats, ferried us across the tributary, well away from the axis, the Jamalpur axis, and our Mukti colleagues rounded up bullock carts and others to carry our heavy mortars, the machine guns and the ammunition across the Brahmaputra. So we did that, got right behind the Jamalpur position on the Jamalpur-Tangail road, almost, I think it was about 10 kilometers south of Jamalpur. And we set up a roadblock there. Two companies facing the Jamalpur position, the other two facing southwards towards Tangail. So that was on the night of 8th, 9th December 1971. And early morning on the 9th, the brigade commander, Brigadier Hardev Singh Clare, came in on a helicopter because we had the mastery of the skies. The Indian Air Force had managed to secure complete air superiority. So he joined us in a helicopter. He came by helicopter and joined us in that position. And it's another aspect of significance there, which again is of historical significance in many ways. He and our commanding officer, Colonel Brar, they decided to send a note to the garrison commander of Jamalpur, who was the commanding officer of 31 Baluch, whose name was Lieutenant Colonel Sultan Ahmed. In those days, all of us commanded battalions as lieutenant colonels, even in the Pakistani army. Now, a note was sent saying that, look, you have now been surrounded. We have got plenty of air support. We have got artillery support. We have enough manpower to reduce your position. We advise you to surrender, and you will be treated in terms of the Geneva Convention and things like that. It's of course recorded in many history books that we sent this note through one of our Mukti colleagues, a chap named Munshi, who later on was given the Bir Purush Award, I think, by the government of Bangladesh. He picked up a cycle from the locals and cycled into the Jamalpur position to hand over this note. After a couple of hours, he returned with a note from that garrison commander, Colonel Sultan Ahmed, with a bullet in that envelope. And his letter, of course, said that all the troops that you have got, your artillery and air forces, are no avail. Let's get on with the battle. And he says, the next time we meet, I hope to see you with a gun in your hand rather than the pen over which you seem to have such mastery. So that, of course, again, the die was cast. So we had decided that there was no other way out except to reduce the position. So that night, that is the night of 9th, 10th December, we moved up closer to Jamalpur position, the fortress as it were. And we took up by first light of the 10th of December, we had moved up to almost within 1,000 meters south of the Jamalpur position. Remember that north of it was the Brahmaputra tributary and our advancing troops, remainder of the brigade advancing from that direction. So we dug up there for the night, and at first light of the 10th of December we were ready in again, waiting for further action to reduce the position. Now, as it happened, there was some sporadic shelling during the day to which we were subjected, and in the afternoon the battalion commander, on the instructions of the higher headquarters, the brigade commander and the general officer commanding of 101 Com Zone, Major General Nagra, gave orders for the attack of this position. We listened to his orders, and once he had finished his orders, as the senior company commander and in fact CO designate of that battalion, I took it on myself to request Colonel Brad to delay the attack by a night so that we could carry out more detailed reconnaissance during the night and carry out the assault effectively, because we hadn't had much time for the detailed reconnaissance of the position before attacking. But he was not able to accede to that request because there was pressure from the top to complete the assault and secure Jamalpur, because the following night a parachute drop was to take place north of Tangail. So anyway, we went back to our positions, and I gave, as a company commander, I got my orders grouped together, gave the orders for the attack, and I had deployed one of my platoons on a little ridge line about 500 meters ahead of my position. That means he was as close as 500 meters to the Jamalpur defenses on the west of the road. So while we were making our preparations for the attack, we got the battalion commander informed us, the company commanders, that the higher headquarters had agreed to a delay by one night of the attack, so we could carry out our patrolling. So there we were getting on. We got our act together. I detailed my patrols for the night. I was planning to accompany one of them during the latter half of the night, and just decided to have some rest, having trudged on foot for the last about 4 days. My feet were naturally pretty sore, blistered in some ways. So I got into one of these trenches, took off my jungle boots, put it on top, and I thought I'll have a bit of a rest. And at about midnight, I think just before midnight, I got a call on my radio set from my platoon commander, who was ahead of me, informing me that the Pakistanis were coming out, their vehicles were coming out from the Jamalpur position along the road, and asking me for instructions as to what he should do. So my answer to him was, the moment they come within range, let fly. He also had a 57mm RCL gun and a medium machine gun detachment with him. So as it happened, as the first vehicle reached, he opened up, and within minutes there were about 4 vehicles on fire on the road south of the Jamalpur position. And then of course there was all hell broke loose in this. We couldn't see much, but we could hear these cries of Allahu Akbar and attempts at assaulting this platoon position and others assaulting my company position, or the remainder of my company and the company on the east of the road. It had started, so the assault had started, because they had realized the vehicles can't get through. They decided to break out, as it were, of this roadblock. Now it is one of those great, I think, shall we say, lucky pieces of the draw in battle, that they had to break out rather than us assaulting, because when you are attacking, you're always at a slight disadvantage rather than a person who is in a defensive position. So there, to that extent, I think it paid off, this delay in our assault to that extent. So then, of course, throughout the night there was just, of course, the moment firing broke out, I jumped up, tried to put on my jungle boots, and found that they had been ripped apart by bullets that had been flying. So on my bare feet I walked around my company positions, sort of boosting up the men and trying to tell them that, look, stay put, nothing, you guys don't have to. And it's a tribute to our great soldiers that, once they see the leader is able to, be with them, their determination, courage, and is something which is quite unique. And that is something which has lived with me all these years. As it happened, it was a disaster as far as the Pakistanis were concerned. Of course, some of them did manage to get through the gap between the two companies and wriggle through to, but the rest of them were butchered in many ways. And that came to light because in the morning, I think by about 4:30, there were cries of, that they wanted to surrender, and people started coming up with their hands up to surrender. So we took about 62 or 63 to surrender. By then it was about first light. The dawn had broken out, and we saw the massacre that we had managed to achieve, because there were later the count was 234 Pakistanis killed, 23 wounded. 62 of them surrendered in my company position and my colleague's company. And my battalion commander then, when he got this great news, he ordered me to take my company and secure the garrison. So I moved up with my company towards the Jamalpur garrison. And as we were approaching the garrison, a Pakistani soldier bleeding from his mouth with a white flag came out, indicating that the garrison wanted to surrender. And of course, to just go back a little bit, when we used to call them a bodyguard in our battalion, our orderly or batman as we used to call, we call them bodyguard in the Jangi Paltan. My bodyguard was carrying a pair of Hawaii chappals in his big pack. Why he was carrying that, I still don't know. But when he saw me with my bare feet, he gave them to me. So when I moved in towards Jamalpur, I was wearing these Hawaii chappals. And I took the surrender of the garrison, which comprised 3 officers and about 370 JSOs and other rank, all told. Almost 380 of them. I was in my cap comforter with Hawaii chappals on my feet. Took the surrender and then handed over to the CO, who then handed over to the brigade commander. And by then the GOC landed up, I think, General Bummy, and who was then a G2 major at that time, in his helicopter. And I quickly, of course, by then I was, had enough. I sort of went back to my company position to have a shave and write a quick note to my wife on one of those good old forces letters which we had at that time, because we had no mobiles to communicate. My wife didn't know whether I was alive or dead. I quickly wrote that and handed it over to one of these reporters who had come with General Nagra in his helicopter, and asked him to post it in Bombay when he went back. So that was the Battle of Jamalpur. It was one of our great, I think, historical feats as far as our battalion was concerned, maybe in the history of the Indian Army's annals, but that was one thing. Then, of course, after that, that was on the night of 10th, 11th. So 11th we had a break, and on the 12th morning we were again asked to resume our advance towards Tangail, because the para drop had taken place on the night of 11th, 12th. So there we were, and by then, till then we were on foot, as I said, with our blistered feet. But in Jamalpur we managed to round up some buses, trucks, and a fire engine, and took that, and we started our advance towards Tangail. And there we linked up with 2 para north of Tangail, with the 2 para and Tiger Siddiqui of the Mukti Bahini. By then, Tangail had been vacated by the Pakistanis. There was no fight left in them. They'd all been asked to pull back towards Dhaka. So then we entered Tangail again without a fight, and after a bit of a break there, continued. By then another brigade had come to sort of take over the advance, shall we say, towards Dhaka, but we still continued on another axis. And as it happened, to cut a long story short, because there was no particular battle as far as we were concerned after that, but the surrender of Dhaka was effected on the 16th, and by General Jacob, as you are all aware. And again, the battalion headquarters and my company, which was Y Company as it was, were tasked to go enter Dhaka. So we entered Dhaka on the afternoon of 16th of December 1971. And that was the end of that chapter. But there is a sort of postscript which is very important here. Because as I told you, we entered Dhaka on the afternoon. I think we entered at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon into Dhaka with the battalion headquarters. The battalion headquarters, my battalion commander and the brigade commander went off. I think they went and plonked themselves in the Hotel Intercontinental and conducted some press conferences there, while I was tasked to take the battalion headquarters and my company to find a place to look. Now, as we entered Dhaka, the point, as a postscript I want to add to that operation or battle was that the Pakistanis were there on that night in much larger strength than us. And as we were going through the roads, all these barracks, they were staring at us with their weapons, but they had surrendered, so there was no fighting. We moved up, and finally I found of places, the president's house in Dhaka was vacant. So I decided to spend the night at the president's house in Dhaka. That is the night of 16th, 17th December. And there I was that night with the few of my officers, my company and the battalion headquarters. We sat down in Yahya Khan's house and enjoyed our dinner. I in fact spent my night on the same bed that Yahya used to sleep in, I suppose. So that was another great event. This is all with the presence of the locals, who, though very scared of the Pakistani presence because they were still present and with their weapons, sort of embraced us as effectively as they could, and they were very, very overjoyed to absolute see us. So we spent the night, and the next morning, of course, there was no question of staying on in that house. We had to find another proper place to settle because the rest of the battalion, we went into the cantonment area and barracks, because by then the Pakistanis also being shepherded into. Jangi Paltan had Alpha Company, A Company, Y Company, C Company and D Company. The Y Company was because in World War II, at a certain stage in the battle, before the battle of Sinio, where Namdev Jadhav got his Victoria Cross, they had lost a lot of casualties. So the commanding officer, the company commander, a Britisher, asked his senior JSU, what do we do? He said, साहब भी इस कंपनी को हम दूसरे तरफ से अल्फ़ाबेट दे देते हैं, Z के, इसके बहुत बैड लक हो गया है Y company का. So and they got the Victoria Cross the next day. So ever since then, 1945, that company was known as Y Company. So the Pakistanis were by then being shepherded into specific areas as prisoners of war. But the historical perspective that needs to be brought into this is that our senior commanders, the chief obviously, the army commander, and next morning the co-commander who was coming along the other axis, General Sagat Singh, and his troops had also arrived. They allowed the Pakistanis to retain this thing before the surrender clause was executed was that they would be allowed to retain their weapons for that night or maybe another night. Because if they had not had their weapons, they would have been butchered by the Bangladeshis, whom they had ill-treated tremendously. So that allowance was given to them to retain their weapons on the night of 16th, 17th, and that's right. And the formal laydown of weapons was effected, I think, on the 18th of December. It was formally done at the parade ground or some Maidan there, where Niazi and his other senior generals and all the Pakistanis formally laid. After them, they were under our protection. Our protection means the Indian Army's protection. So because it took that much time for us to muster troops in Dhaka to guard these things. Other places were being handled separately. But the first night, the night of 16, 17 December, I think we didn't have more than a couple of thousand personnel in Dhaka, whereas they numbered easily about 10,000. So that was that is something which is of some significance. So these are the sort of these things about the war. And here I think to give all credit to the Mukti Bahini, I think I must make this point that without them, we would not have succeeded in this war. There's no question. Without the Muktis assisting us both in terms of guiding, in terms of carrying our weapons and equipment, and giving us details about these positions, we wouldn't have achieved this. And some of them did a tremendous job, as I mentioned to you. Tiger Siddiqui's group, at least on our axis, there were others who did extremely well, and and of course, by the same token, the Muktis themselves could not have overtaken or overwhelmed the Pakistanis by themselves. So it had to be a combined effort, and it was, I think, a classic example of local complete coordination with us. So it's a great thing, and I would, as I mentioned earlier, the recollections about this operation and the war, in terms of lasting memories, basically two, I would say, among other things. There are many more that one could talk of, but two of them are, one is of course the outstanding courage, determination, commitment, and the loyalty of our men. They respond to, I mean, you just have to provide the leadership, and this is still true of our army. And second, of course, I think we were very lucky, our battalion. We had this great outstanding leadership of a person like Bulbul Brar, from whom I was again privileged to assume command later after the war, when we moved to the Western Theatre in April 1972. The brigade commander, Brigadier Clare, again man of great courage. The General Officer Commanding, General Nagra, great courage. But more importantly than courage was that they gave us a job to do and let us execute it. They didn't interfere in the execution of our job, which is why we were able to, I think, produce the goods so effectively for them. And one last, a couple of last issues I'd like to make. One is about the link up in Tangail. Link up in Tangail is historically significant again for the fact that 1st Maratha Light Infantry, the 1st Battalion of the Maratha Light Infantry, Jangi Paltan it's called, it was given this nom de plume many years ago, linked up with 2nd Para, which is old 3rd Battalion, the Maratha Light Infantry. 3rd Battalion, the Maratha Light Infantry, was converted to 2 Para after independence. So that was the battalion which was dropped north of Tangail. And so there are 2 Maratha battalions literally which linked up north of Tangail. So these are the sort of things that one recalls of that operation. Yes, after the war we remained in contact with a number of our friends from the... of course, in my case, personally, I had occasion to go to Bangladesh on a couple of occasions to attend conferences, but I wasn't able to revisit the battle scenes. That we finally managed to do in 2014. So we visited the battle areas. We went right up to Jamalpur, and I must say again, it's a tribute to our Pakistani, our Bangladeshi. They really welcomed us with great. They looked after us extremely well. And in the battle area, battle sites, Jamalpur, Kamalpur, Bakshiganj, the division which was in charge of that area hosted us right through and took us through. So there again, it was fantastic. I think that the message for the youngsters is, your professionalism, dedication, and your qualities of leadership are what will, always stand you in good stead. And in the qualities of leadership, it is a question of drawing the respect of your men and their loyalty, which is always forthcoming, provided you are professional and competent.